Good morning to you. It is time for us to focus on Shelton, brought to you by our community credit union. Morning, Vicki.
Good morning. Always fun to focus on Shelton.
Oh, it is. And we have got three great guests in studio today. Deputy Mayor Deidre Peterson, Bob Jean, who's the Assistant Interim City Manager, and Teri Schnitzer. Did I get that right, Bob?
You did.
Good. And Teri Schnitzer, good to see you.
Thank you.
We are talking about all sorts of things. First things first, as we are about a week into this new experiment with the City Council, some goals were brought forth on what we think we'd like to accomplish and things like that. Deidre, let's start with you. Talk about these goals.
Absolutely. So the City Council gathered with the City staff leadership team last Thursday for an all-day retreat. And during that time, we really spent a lot of our energy looking at where do we need to go from here. Given a lot of new realities, a lot of information, where do we need to focus our time and give some direction to staff so that the folks who are there putting this into practice can really be successful.
Very nice.
And so we narrowed those down to 8, which does not sound like it's narrowed down, but for us sure was. No shock to anyone here that financial sustainability topped the list for us.
Yeah.
And I know Bob and Teri will talk about that a little bit. We also talked a lot about community strategic vision, long-term planning, making sure that the community is involved and has information and feels like they're part of that process. And I think that's something that we heard time and again throughout the campaigns. You know, every candidate and all of our current staff really have a vested interest in hearing what the citizens have to say. This is our community, and if we don't take that feedback, we're not going to be nearly as successful.
That is important.
So we heard that time and again, and it became a theme throughout our goals. Economic development was huge. We know that in order to have a community that's going to grow, we have to be thoughtful and sustainable in that growth. People have to have jobs. They have to have places to live. We need to kind of close that retail gap. And those are some of the things that have started with the economic consultant that's come in, the retail coach and things, and that continues to be something the council will look at. Of course, customer service is always something that needs to be front of mind and is something that city staff, from everything from building permits to utility billing and any process, we want to make sure that that's being addressed. And the overall city organization and budget, that's something that we're going to have to take a look at as we get a little further down the road. Hiring a new city manager, what do the departments look like, how are we structuring our staff and cross-training, and just really making sure that we as a city are working collaboratively, not only internally, but with county partners, other local agencies, so that we're working together to move things forward in a meaningful way.
Very nice.
Bob, you've seen the transition here firsthand and coming in recent. How has it gone from the commission to the council and then the increase of community outpouring and reach and conversations? Good trends? Are you seeing good trends on this?
Yeah, I think I'm a semi-retired city manager, and I was approached by the city to come in and kind of do two things. One, come in as the interim assistant and help provide some technical support to our city manager and staff, but also kind of as a coach to the new council and the current staff. And so I got to interview all of the candidates, Deidre among all the others. I loved her summary there, by the way. She just really nailed it. And so one of my jobs is to kind of help with this transition. I know there was a lot of politics going on, a lot of heat, but I do give outgoing Mayor Gary Krantz a lot of credit for saying, look, we're going to make this transition work, and he started to work on that with Vicki Look and the staff in January. So it's been a real team effort. And I was delighted with the involvement of the new council. We put some tough stuff on the plate. Deidre was focused on the goals and where we want to go, but we do have some challenges, and they were ready for it. So I was encouraged. I think this transition's going pretty well.
Good.
Great.
Let's talk about the financial stability. That was one of the goals, and you guys have been looking in at the books a little closer. How are we doing here?
Well, this is kind of the tough love side of my job. You know, when I first got here, first thing I did was take a look at the budget, and on page 7 of the budget, it was like pretty glaring to me. We basically adopted a deficit. We said we were going to plan on spending more money than we were going to bring in. And I went, oh, well, that's not normally a good idea.
Right.
And the city did have the cash in their beginning cash balances to cover that, so they could do that. But that's a short-term operation. Long-term, we've got to get revenues and expenditures in balance, and that's where Deidre was talking about. We're going to have to take a look at how we're organized, how we're staffed, and what service levels we can provide with the revenues we do have. Mm-hmm. So that's the challenge. The simple numbers, I'll let Teri talk a little bit about what she started doing in January, but the simple numbers are the adopted deficit was $2.3 million, more than expenditures were $2.3 million more than planned, and in the general fund, which is where we pay for police and a lot of the basic stuff, it was $1.8 million deficit. So I was very concerned about that, and got to know Teri really well as the interim finance director, and her day job is our finance operations manager, so this extra job was forced on her when the former finance director left, and after Ryan left, it was left to Teri to sort out where are we. So you want to talk a little bit about what you guys did?
Yeah.
So when I came on in January, a lot of the leadership team came to me with some concerns about budget, and so, but I quickly learned that the 2016 and at that time 17 needed to be looked at, but the 2016 annual report had not even been processed or even began to get worked out with the auditor's office, and that's important. This by state law, you need to have your annual reports filed at a certain time, and so that was a huge concern for me. So I did get with Vicki Look, the interim center manager, and quickly agreed that we would hire a CPA firm to process those 2016 and the 2017 annual reports, which then they would be able to give us a good baseline ending fund balances for each year to begin the 2018 revised budget. So that was very important to do.
Was that a tough process for the CPA? Did it take them a long time to kind of find all the things and get stuff back to you?
They did have to do some, because the city did go from accrual-based accounting to the cash-based accounting. And so they did have to work out some adjusting entries for us, but it didn't take too long. They were able to do it, yes, thankfully. And they're very skilled at what they do. So it was just a collaboration effort between our department to get that information to the CPAs in a timely manner so that they can get the information back to us.
Well, I had mentioned, the deficit, the adopted deficit at $2.3 million, and that was being covered mostly by about $4.8 million in estimated beginning cash in the general fund. When we got the CPA's report, however, that number proved not to be correct. And the number was $2.5 million, down another $2.4. Now, I know your listening audience loves to hear numbers and people prattle on, but the reality is when you start with a 2.3 deficit and then your cash that we're going to use to help cover that was 2.4 lower, we now have basically a 4.7 hole. And that was the issue I shared with the council. And I had had a chance through the interviews to kind of give them a sneak peek as this information was coming from finance, and we were talking to the council members, and so I think they weren't surprised, but the totality of it was, I think, a little bigger than all of us were expecting when we started digging into this, when Teri and the CPAs, and also we brought in an experienced budget accountant to help work through the expenses. We found that there were unbudgeted, they were known, but not budgeted salary and benefit costs, about $580,000 all funds, and about $365,000 in the general fund. So those numbers in and of themselves would be the kind of thing you'd have to adjust. But on top of the deficit, the beginning deficit, and on top of the collapse in that beginning cash, basically we've got our hands full. So our task right now is to really fully understand the size and scope of where the city's finances are. And then our plan is to deal with 2018, get that dealt with, get a recommendation to the council on what changes we want to make. We're not going to be able to close that entire deficit for 18.
Sure.
But I am committed that we will give the council a balanced budget for 2019. And how we get there is yet to be figured out. So we'll have a busy summer for this new council.
So you get a sense, though, that at least everybody is aware the cards are on the table now, and we can start moving forward out of this? Or there's still some
there's many people are familiar with what they call the 7 steps of death and dying, when you're told by your doctor that you have a terminal illness, and the first step is denial. Mm-hmm. Can't be.
No way.
And then you work through it, and you go through anger, and you go through frustration, and I think we're still going through those steps.
Okay.
But we will hopefully very quickly get to understanding and action, because the community expects that of us, and this council is fully committed to it. They actually asked for an earlier meeting ahead of what we had originally planned, so I know they're anxious, and we're trying to get the best information we can to them as soon as we can.
Very nice.
People have a sense that they're able to come and talk with the new council about these issues at any time they see them on the street. I was driving home the other day. I saw a couple council members two council members talking to each other outside, and it was kind of nice to see that as they collaborate, and then someone come in and add their 2 cents and then move on.
And that has been one of the greatest assets, I think, to us moving to this new form of government, is we have the opportunity to sit down together and kind of hash through some of these things, and reach out to the community members who either have expertise or have concerns, and have really honest conversations about what that looks like. I heard time and again throughout the campaigns, but also at the retreat last week, that this new city council is incredibly committed to identifying where we're starting from, looking at those challenges, and finding a way to make it through. If there's one thing that we know about this community, we can overcome. Mm-hmm. So if we can identify what we need to accomplish and work together to make that happen, I have every confidence in this staff and in this council and in this community that we can do that. It's not going to be easy. We definitely have some work to do, and it's going to be some difficult work. But as Bob mentioned, we're already giving city staff a nudge that we're ready to get going on this now, and they're getting us information as quickly as they can, working to really help us to get through this next phase.
I mentioned that one of my jobs was as a coach, and I've been doing city and county management for 40 years, and another few months I'll be glad to go back to being retired again. But I've worked with a lot of different councils, and I always like to see a city council that has a cross-section of community opinion amongst the council members, and we have a mix of ages, a mix of men and women. We have a mix of people with different professional and work backgrounds. The council they're a talented group, and I think the citizens chose well, and we're going to work through these adjustments to get this budget back into balance, and we'll go forward from there. And then our schedule is to get the interviews for the new city manager done July 30th and 31st.
Okay.
So hopefully, as we're putting together the budget, the final budget preparation recommendations for 2019, we'll be doing that in August. So hopefully we can at least know who the new manager is and involve them in some of the critical points on that as well, so that they won't come in late August, early September, and just be totally,
sure.
Out of it.
Caught out of surprise. Yeah.
Right.
For sure.
So the idea is that we can involve them early on and move forward.
Very nice.
Jeff, if I may, the city has also assigned us all separate cell phone numbers. We have emails now for the city. So if you're wanting to reach out to one of us, there's 7 folks on the council and you don't know how to reach us, call the city. They have our cell phone numbers. They have our emails. We are happy to hear from those folks. And the staff have a lot of answers that if we don't know off the top of our head, we can find out. And we're committed to working through this together with the community. So I appreciate the chance to come in and visit with you folks this morning.
Very cool.
Teri, Bob, and Deidre here for the Focus on Shelton. Good to talk with y'all. Have a good rest of your day.